Good morning, good afternoon and good evening everyone. I hope wherever you are and whatever you're doing that you're having a fantastic day. Today we're going to be taking a look at the absolute best units that you can get. We'll split this up into 4 categories with a few subcategories under each category. We'll be taking a look at infantry, cavalry, horse archers and archers. Now, some of the units that we're going to be talking about are what's known as the special units or the unique units, the recruits that are a little bit harder to get than the regular recruits, in which case I will also give you an alternative, a recruit that's easier to get in your army but not necessarily as strong as the special counterpart. Now, the first category we'll be looking at is infantry, specifically heavy infantry, and here I'll give you 2 options. Firstly, the Vlandian Sergeant. This is the best heavy infantry versus other infantry, as they will usually spawn with a heavy mace, which provides them with significant blunt damage, which is extremely effective against other heavy infantry. Now, the unit I prefer over the Sergeant is actually the Kazate Darkan. Even though this unit would most likely lose 1 versus 1 against a Vlandian Sergeant, they spawn with a polearm to counter cavalry, as well as their standard powerful saber and shield, which makes them great in defensive formations and also in sieges. Plus, they also spawn with javelins, which means they can start hitting enemies from afar before they even get near, whereas the Vlandian Sergeant doesn't have a ranged weapon. At the end of this video, I'll also put an infographic on the screen to give you a very quick and easy snapshot of my top 2 or 3 recommendations for each category of unit. So if you'd like to take a screenshot of that or just write it down somewhere, that's yours to keep so that you know exactly who to recruit once you finish watching this video. Next, we'll move into two-handed infantry, and here again I recommend a Vlandian, which is actually the Vougier. I believe that's how it's pronounced anyway. This is the most versatile two-handed infantry. Similarly to the Darkan, he has a polearm for cavalry charges, a powerful two-handed weapon to cleave through swathes of weaker infantry, and also starts with throwing axes so he can start hitting enemies from afar. Now, the strongest two-handed unit in terms of raw damage is actually the Sturgian Heroic Linebreaker. He is also quicker than the Vougier and has a stronger throwing arm as well. So if you just need raw damage, then he is the better pick. However, he offers next to no defense, which is why my top pick would be his Vlandian counterpart. My honorable mention for infantry in both categories is the Legionary from the Imperials. He is a jack of all trades and a master of none. He's a very solid infantry, but he doesn't excel particularly in one specific category over the previously mentioned infantry units. Now on to the cavalry. It's a very close toss-up between the Imperial Elite Cataphracts and the Vlandian Banner Knights. However, I personally feel the Banner Knights are stronger for these reasons. Now, the Elite Cataphracts definitely have the best armor out of any horse unit in the game, and they use maces which deal devastating blunt damage to other heavily armored troops. However, their reach is lacking and they cannot couch their lances. The Banner Knights, on the other hand, are able to couch their lances, which makes them far superior when charging. This allows them to kill any unit in the game in one hit. They also have a slightly better one-handed skill than their Imperial counterpart, which makes them much more effective in sieges. However, the main reason I'm going to give this to the Banner Knights over the Cataphracts is how easy they are to amass later in game. Once you have the perk that allows you to convert bandits into regular troops, which I believe is the disciplinarian perk within the leadership tree, you can convert highwaymen into Vlandian champions and then Vlandian champions into Banner Knights. So you can have potentially the best heavy cavalry unit in the game in 2 steps, just 2 upgrades. Now, my honorable mention for cavalry would be the Kazate Heavy Lancer. However, it doesn't require you to find a special recruit. It's upgradable straight from the normal Kazate Nomad unit tree, and he is a solid 3rd pick, which is why the battle you saw in the intro, I had about 100 of these guys because they're a lot easier to recruit than the Banner Knights or the Elite Cataphracts. Oh, also, please do consider subscribing. It really helps the channel out, and we are getting that little bit closer to the 1,000 subscriber mark every single day. Thank you all so much so far for your support. And when you do subscribe, it makes me go from this to this. Now, onto horse archers. Obviously, the Khan's Guard wins by a landslide. It's just far superior than any other horse archer in the game. However, as discussed previously with the Banner Knights, etc., it's a special unit and therefore isn't particularly recruitable. Therefore, The alternative would actually be the Imperial Bucellari. They are much worse than the Khan's Guard at first glance. And of course, they are much weaker in most situations, don't get me wrong. The Khan's Guard, hands down, you want them if you can. However, these guys come from standard Imperial recruits, so they're much more recruitable. They do have better heavy armor and also decent stats in melee combat and athletics, which makes them useful for sieges, so they are versatile in your army. And they're not bad horse archers, especially in large numbers. Finally, we'll look at ranged troops, both bowmen and crossbowmen. Now, of course, I'm sure everyone in the Bannerlord community knows the Battanian Fian champion is absolute god tier, but they are going to be very hard to recruit in large numbers early on in the game. Again, once you have the perk that lets you convert bandit troops, you can upgrade bushwhackers to freebooters to forest bandits into Fians. Perfect, you can get so many of them then. However, until then, I recommend the Aserai Master Archer. They come from standard Aserai recruits, so they are very easily recruitable, and they have the second best bowmanship after the Fians as far as foot bowmen go. Now, for crossbowmen, it really is personal preference between the Imperial Sergeant crossbowman and the Vlandian Sharpshooter. The only difference between the two is that the Imperial Sergeant crossbowman has a higher bow skill, whereas the Sharpshooter has a higher riding skill. They use crossbows and they're on foot, so neither of them use bows and neither of them use horses. So apart from that, they are literally identical. Use whichever one you prefer, whichever one is easier for you to get hold of. They are the same unit. Now, with that, I have given you a few different alternatives for all the possible troop types, bar some very specific niche subsets, such as I believe there's a horse archer out there that throws axes rather than arrows, but I will leave you with this handy little infographic, as I mentioned at the start of the video. Hopefully that can help you in the heat of the moment in game. You can just glance over and check what recruits it is you want to be aiming for, and with that you should have an absolutely unstoppable army on the battlefield for all stages of the game, from the early game to the mid game right through to the late game. As always, I really hope this was helpful. Please let me know in the comments, and with that I hope you have a domtastic day. Bye bye.